Hey, how are you? So we're going to get started in the art studio this week by making this image, and then we'll go downstairs and make a few frames. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the image first. This is called the Screaming Red Ass, and it's the symbol for the 347th Fighter Squadron, and it's basically the nose art. If you don't know what nose art is, it's the artwork on the nose of airplanes, mostly made famous really during World War II. So if you do a Google image search, you'll see what I'm talking about. So my dad and my mom came up for dinner the other day for my dad's birthday, and my dad brought along this book on the 347th Fighter Squadron, and that's where I found the image, along with a picture of my dad's Uncle Pete, who was a munitions loader, meaning he would one of the guys who would load the bombs and the bullets on the airplanes, mostly P-47 Thunderbolts. So we were talking, and I thought, it'd be kind of nice to make an image like this for my dad's birthday. So that's what I'm going to do. We'll get started by printing the image out first, and then I'll show you how to do this aluminum work. I printed the image on a piece of heavy cardstock paper, and it has a matte finish. You can see the paper's a little bit smaller than the 3/4 inch birch plywood that I'm gluing it to. So I've drawn a straight line, and I'm going to try to hold the paper at that line while I glue it down. I'm using wood glue to glue the paper in place and a business card to spread the glue out. I'll place a piece of computer paper over the image to protect it, and then speed up the drying process of the glue with a hot iron. I've let the glue dry for a few minutes, and now I'll flip the panel over and trim the edges of the paper. I've spread a little frog tape, painter's tape on my cutting mat, and I want to cut a nice thin strip about 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to use that to tape out around the circle. I'm rolling the thin strip back onto the large roll so I can use it to work off of. I didn't tape out around the lightning bolts or the clouds, so I'll just have to be careful and cut in with a brush when I apply the sizing. This is the sizing. It's called 1 to size, and this holds the aluminum leaf in place. I'll pour a small amount into a cup to work from. You can use a hairdryer to make this dry a little bit faster. It's been a few minutes, and now the sizing is dry, and you can feel it to touch. It reminds me a little bit of working with contact cement. This is the aluminum. It comes in a book like this, and just try to drop it on there as carefully as you can. The aluminum will stick anywhere that there is sizing. Next, I'll bring this downstairs and give it a few thin coats of lacquer. I'm not sure if you can see the seam that was created from the paper not going all the way across the board, but I like the way it looks. It gives the surface a little definition, and I think it looks a little bit more like actual metal work. After I sprayed the image with lacquer yesterday, I made another image because these are a lot of fun to make. And then I started to paint some color on the images, and I'm painting the color where there's a different level in the aluminum. So you remember how the paper wasn't big enough for this piece of plywood, and you have a defined edge right here, so it's really easy to find that line, tape it out with a little painter's tape, and then paint in a color if you like. Also, I want to point out that if you noticed that the soldier's name was P. Pietraszewski, well, that was my dad's name until maybe 60 years ago or more. My father's parents changed the name from Pietraszewski to Peter. So just in case you were wondering. So I've already framed these two. Let's go ahead and make a float frame for this painting. And for this, I'm using the thermally modified poplar that I used on the beehive build last week. A float frame means that the painting floats within the frame. So if I want an 1/8 of an inch reveal all the way around the painting, and the painting measures 9.5 inches by 10 1/4, I'm going to make the opening of the frame 9 3/4 inches by 10 1/2. The way I like to measure for a float frame is to first make a miter cut and then hold the tape measure at the 1 mark on the inside of that miter cut. And then measure out where you want to make your cut, but don't forget to add 1 inch to your measurement. The measurement that I want is 9 3/4, but if I were to make a mark and cut here, I would be cutting the molding 1 inch too short. So I'm going to make a mark at 10 3/4. For the other side of the frame, I'll use the first piece of molding that I just cut, place it on top of the molding, make sure that I'm flush on the sides, and trace a line. This is the next cut. So now I've got the molding cut for the top and bottom of the frame, and now I'll repeat the process and cut the molding for the sides of the frame. I'm going to assemble the frames using a little wood glue and 1-inch nails in the nail gun, and I wanted to point out that whenever I build frames like this, I put down a clean piece of MDF or plywood to work off of, because my work table has dried glue on it and just things that will scratch the molding, and it's also just not a very nice smooth surface to work off of. So what I like to do is add a little wood glue to the miter joint, use downward pressure, holding the miter together, and then pin it together with the nail gun. Next, I need to add a piece of molding to the inside of the frame that will hold the painting with the surface of the painting flush with the front edge of the frame. And for this, I'm going to use a piece of 1/2-inch plywood that I've already ripped to 1 inch. To make sure the molding is at the right depth, I've cut a piece of scrap wood just a little bit heavier than 3/4 of an inch. As long as the scrap wood is flush with the face of the frame, the molding is in the right position. I'll add a little wood glue and nail the molding in place with 1 1/4 nails. Okay, well, this was a fun project for me, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you'll try it out. It's fun to work with this material, this aluminum leaf. And so I'm going to give this one to my dad for his birthday, like I had mentioned. It's a little bit late for his birthday, but better late than never. And I'm going to keep the one in the center for myself, and this one, the one that I just made, I'm going to put up on an eBay auction. And I'll put a link in the description if you want to check that out. As always, you can find things that I've made up in the studio on my eBay store, along with t-shirts. And if this is the first time you've tuned into my channel, I'd love it if you'd subscribe and give me the thumbs up. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you soon.